Hello everyone, welcome to the Clarity, Supportability, and Feature Training. My name is Bill Yee. And today we're going to cover the new improvements around the generic CSV import for custom master objects for Clarity 16.1.0. So what is new? So what we've done for the generic CSV import for custom master objects is we took the basis of our CSV import from Roadmap and enhanced it. And with that, we took the ability to not only import that for custom master objects, but we added support for static dynamic lookups, both single value and multi-value lookups. We added an option to CSV, the export, in where the file can be directly imported into Clarity. And we have a user setting to define that, and we'll cover that shortly. And also, too, we improved the localization support related to decimal fields when you export CSV, and also to the import supports that as well. And we applied this to also the roadmap import as well. So why are these updates important? Well, customers have data in Excel, which they use to manipulate the data, and they want to import that into Clarity. And they don't want it to be able to enable themselves to do that, to make the changes, import it without having to have a technical resource to do that for them. And also to be able, they have lookup data, which we haven't been able to do in our CSV import for roadmaps. So these new changes are a big plus. And also to allows customers to migrate data between systems from an export area based on what locale you're in, export the data correctly, and then be able to easily import that data into Clarity. So what are the new enhancements with the generic CSV import? Now, the reason why we call it generic is just like our generic grid, generic filter, generic flyout. We plan to roll this out throughout the rest of Clarity. And the first place we're implementing it is in the custom master object. Now, the basis of it was taken from our CSV import and roadmaps, but we enhanced it. And one of the things we enhanced was now the ability to update records. So in the roadmap item import, you'll only be able to create records via CSV import. You also added support for lookups, static, dynamic, single value, and multi-value lookups. We're not bringing the template capability, but we replaced it with a way in where when you CSV export, we added an option where you can it exports the records in a format where you can actually import that directly into Clarity. And we'll cover more of that there shortly. And also, too, we improved some of the language and locale support that was lacking as part of the CSV export, and improved it as part of the CSV import as well. And this is only available for custom master objects, and the functionality is beta. We felt that there's still more things to do, but there's a lot there that I think customers will appreciate and like to utilize. So what are the core changes related to the generic CSV import? One that we mentioned before is that we support not only insert but also update operations for the import. Now the key thing, how do you identify between the insert and the update, is that if the custom master object ID exists, then it will be an update. Otherwise, it will be a new record created. And these are the data types supported. Most of them, a lot of the same. The dates are fixed, just like in the roadmap import. We added that support for dynamic, for single value, and multi-value. And also, too, we have a support for money attributes, but only for single currency Clarity systems only. So in this slide, it covers the high-level flow for the CSV import when you're inserting or creating a record. So the first thing you want to do is configure the grid with the attributes you want to populate on insert. And be sure you include any required attributes needed for the insert. And a quick way of figuring that out is just clicking the plus button to insert a record. And if you don't already, it will automatically add any required attributes that are not inside the grid at the end of the grid. And then filter the grid records for records you want to use as a template to create new records. We feel that's the easiest way of seeing how other records are created and utilize that and update that for your new records to import inside Clarity. And once you're done there, then you set the CSV export format, and this setting, we'll cover more of this shortly, is to it formats the CSV export record with the header records and any additional lookup information around for that data inside the CSV when you export it out. And once you have that exported, that CSV data, then you modify it appropriately to get ready for the import. And make sure you note that the ID is unique and doesn't already exist. Because if you're using an existing ID, then this will be an update versus an insert. And if on your system you have the ID auto-numbered, just keep the value blank in your CSV, and the system will generate the ID for you. And once you have your CSV done, then you import the CSV. So in this screen, we covered the CSV import update flow. So the first item there is to configure the grid that you want to update. And just be sure to include the name and ID which are required for the update. And for this one, you need to note the existing ID that resides inside the system, because this is an update. If you create a new ID that doesn't exist in the system, this will be an insert. Then also to filter the data to display the records you want to update. So any lookups or anything else, you want to get that inside the grid. So then when the next step is when you export it out, always ensure that your CSV export format is set to export import. That will bring over the additional import export header records and lookup information. And then you go ahead and export that data to CSV. Modify the data that you want to update within your CSV, and then you import that CSV file into the system. So in this slide, we're going to explain the new CSV Export Format option. And this option resides under the avatar, the settings in general, and here's a screenshot. Now, the option is called, here it is, I think the new setting is called Export Import. Now, if you have it set out of the box, it's set to default, so your CSV export works as it does prior to this release. But if you choose this option, what it does is that it exports kind of 2 additional records that are needed for the import. This is similar if you use the CSV import for roadmaps. It gives some identification labels for that particular column you're going to import, and the API attribute ID for that particular attribute. And the remaining fields are the data you're going to import. It will export some additional information related to lookups, which we'll cover in a later slide. And we feel this is better than what we have with that template that you downloaded, because in that template we just only just added subdata. This is actual real data that you can export and import directly into the same system or a different system, or you can modify it and to use this as a basis for creating new records or updating new records. And one thing to note, this option only applies where the generic CSV import is supported, which is currently only right now the custom master object grids. So in this slide, we're going to discuss the static lookup syntax within the CSV in order to import that into Clarity. So with the for static lookups, all you need to have is using the label that you have within the grid, and we apply that within the CSV. And the same goes with MVLs. So for MVLs, each of the different values are delimited by a semicolon, and that's the same way it's going to look inside the CSV as well. Note, there is a possibility inside your static lookup you could have duplicate labels. And if the system identifies that you have duplicate labels, it will abort the lookup and nothing will be imported. So keep that in mind, and the system will identify that when you're trying to do the import at runtime. So for dynamic lookups, we need some additional information inside the CSV, because there's more we need to understand when we importing that within Clarity. So with the dynamic lookups, both for SVL and MBL, is that we need the lookup label and the lookup ID. And this is also, when you export this out using the export import option, it'll export that as well. So if you look at the one for the single value lookup, this is how it displays on the grid. And if you choose the export import option and you export it out, it will show you, it will export out the label here, so Tom Chapin, and also too within parentheses it also export the ID for Tom Chapin as well. So we feel that in terms of the flow, how you handle this is when you export this out, it'll give you the information related to all the, say for this one, all the resources you have here, and you can use kind of copy and paste in terms of updating additional fields from one value to the other, and to give you some idea what you have it. And the way to look at that, maybe if you don't have it within this CSV file, you filter the grid and try to get the information you want to change it to, export that out, so that then you can go ahead use that information as exported out that's not in this in your CSV, and then you can go and update the fields appropriately. And the same goes for the multi-value lookup. And here I give a kind of another area kind of up front, and where same with the CSV is that you have the label name and also to the ID, and each of the different values that are selected are separated with the semicolon. So you just go ahead and just add those items as you need to. So just ensure you have both the lookup label and lookup ID. So I also want to highlight the same that we had with the CSV import for row maps. For dates, we use a fixed format of a 4-digit year, 2-digit month, and a 2-digit day. So make sure that's the format you use as part of your CSV import, and also too the dates will be exported out the same way as well. And also note that we've added some enhancements around the language support. So based on the language setting for that particular user, it will use that setting to export that label, depending. Here's kind of English, this is Spanish, and this is French. And then also too, the CSV import understands that as well. So based on the user's language, it will understand and take based on the language support, and then update the lookup appropriately. So this is actually the same lookup with 3 different languages, with English, Spanish, and French. So regarding the CSV import-export data sizes and admin options, the maximum number of records is 250 records you can import via CSV import per operation. But note that you can't export more than 250 records, and the CSV export import option will work for records greater than 250. It's just when you import it, you need to separate your CSV files into 250 record chunks in order to import that into Clarity. And since this is a beta feature, and some customers may not want this exposed in their production environment, we had an option under system options to disable CSV import. So what this will do, if this flag is unchecked, the action under custom master objects for that pull down will be hidden. And also too, this flag doesn't impact the CSV import for roadmap items, so that will still remain. But also too, the CSV export option will not be hidden even though this flag is set to false. So maybe one of the use cases is that they may have disabled the generic CSV import on your production environment, but you may want to export some information with that additional header information out of production, and then enable CSV import on maybe on a test or development environment to prepare for when this becomes GA. So just keep that in mind. And also too, this option is enabled by default on upgrade. So if you don't want this enabled in your environment, you need to uncheck this flag under System Option. So in this slide, I'm going to cover items that are not beta. So far, I'm going to cover items that have just been beta related to the CSV import and also the export. But this item, as you notice, has no beta tag. We made these improvements by request by customers. So one of the changes we've done is having locale decimal delimiter support in the CSV export. So prior to this release is that when we exported the CSV file, we didn't take into account the locale of the user. So it would always be a decimal as part of the a period as part of the decimal when it was exported. So there was no way to identify, when you in the CSV file where the decimal actually started. So as part of this enhancement, say for example, if you have decimals inside your grid and based on your locale, it will export that out appropriately in the CSV file. So here's how it is in the grid, and then also too, this is how it's exported out in there. So here the delimiter is a comma as part of the decimal delimiter, and that's based on the user's locale and where they're from. But note, this is only available in the Modern UX, and it works only on the Modern UX grids. And it works for both of the CSV export formats if you use the default or export import. And also too, we've enhanced this also too, not only for the CSV the export, it works for all the exports, and also too, we enhanced the import for roadmaps to understand the locale decimal delimiter. So you can go ahead, export the information out, and then go to your roadmaps and import that in as well. And also too, the generic CSV import understands this new locale decimal delimiter, but that's the only area that will still be beta, is that the even though we'll still support it under the generic CSV import, but that area is still beta. But the locale decimal delimiter enhancement is applied throughout all the grids in the Modern UX, and also to the CSV import for roadmaps also supports that new delimiter format. So let me do a demonstration of the generic CSV import for custom master objects so you can see them in action. So first I'm going to give a demonstration of the CSV import in creating records. So the first thing you want to look at is use a CSV export as a template to insert and create new records. So adjust the fields, columns within the grid for the fields you want to update for the new inserted records. You may want to go ahead and filter those records down if you have a lot of records. And before you do your export, verify your CSV export settings. So if you go under the avatar settings and general, your CSV export format should be set to export import. This will export the appropriate header records and IDs needed for the CSV import. So with that, let's do a CSV export. And here it creates a CSV file for me. And then let's go look at this file. And what it'll do here is that it exported the appropriate records that I had in my grid. And one thing to note, the first two rows are the appropriate header records. The first row is the label for that attribute, and the second row are the API attribute IDs for that particular attribute. So this is what we have. Now one thing to note, we're going to do an inserting of records. So you need to make sure your IDs are unique because it's going to create new records. If it's the same, it's going to do an update. And also too, I know for this particular object that I have auto numbering set, so I would leave the code or ID here blank. So I'm going to blank this out, these items out. So I'm going to insert these records into my system. So I'm going to save that. And for right now, I'm just going to delete these records because I want to actually show the creation of the records. So I'm going to delete it. And then do a CSV import. Select that. Select the import file. Pick that. Open. And it goes ahead and creates the records into your system. So next, I'm going to show how to use CSV import to update existing records. So first, verify the columns you want to use. Verify that you have the columns that you want to extract, and you're going to use that to update your records on your custom master object. Also, too, you may want to filter that down if you have a lot of records. And before you do your export, make sure you have your CSV Export Format set correctly, and this we do, is set to Export Import. And now let's go ahead and export the records out. We'll go ahead and create this CSV file. Let's open that file up. Okay, and let's bring that up. So you'll see here, it brings up the same items that I had in the grid into my CSV file. So let's do some updates to some of these existing records. For example, let's take the first one here for insurance. This is a CSV file, and this is actually a single value static lookup. So in order to update it, we can just change the label. So I'm going to change the first two, we call it to charity, just for this one. And let's change the first two. And then from the other one here is, for example, the priority field. This is another single value lookup. Let's just change, make sure the first two records are set to very high. So we change that one here. The sponsor field. This is a single value dynamic lookup. So that's why we have the labels and the IDs there. So just for this one, we'll change it. We'll change the first two records to be the same, Liz Chase. So we'll just change those. And the funding manager is an MVL dynamic lookup. So what it does is it'll show you the label and ID, and they're separated by semicolons. So let's have the first record and the second record be the same for the funding manager. And for that, and also too, the important item when you're doing an update is making sure you use the same ID, because it's going to use that ID to identify that record in order to update. If it's a unique ID, it's going to create a new record. But for this example, we're going to do an update. So we're going to save these files, and let's go ahead and import this record to see the updates. So we go ahead, import, choose it, choose our import CSV, and we updated all these records. So we chose very high for both of these, the charity, both the same. The funding manager, the two records, they're both the same, and it imported all my records correctly. This concludes the CSV import updates. Thank you.